It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Disney Plus wants to know, are you ready?
Yes!
For Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, The New Avengers, now streaming on Disney Plus.
Let's do this.
One of the best Marvel movies of all time is now streaming on Disney Plus.
Hey, you weren't listening to me.
I said Thunderbolts, The New Avengers is now streaming on Disney Plus.
Meet the New Avengers.
That's cool name.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, The New Avengers, rated PG-13, now streaming on, you guessed it, Disney Plus.
Roger, that's no rough guess right now, over. 1-1. Right outside the building.
Welcome to True Spies, Brief Histories. Season 2, Spy Cities. Our cities are the arena in which the great game of espionage is played, providing all manner of stage setting, from grand embassies to average-looking suburban homes. In these bonus minisodes, we'll draw on the knowledge of our True Spies experts to enhance your understanding of the secret forces that have always operated in the places we call home.
The real culmination of his sort of UK integration strategy came a couple of days later when he closed the deal to buy a tube station from the British government.
I'm Joe Foley, series producer for True Spies, and this is a brief history of London. London, a city of 10 million people speaking more than 300 languages. It's a global hub of trade and tourism, and despite what you might have heard, the food's not bad either. But then again, I'm biased. The True Spies podcast might have a global outlook, but for the most part, it's made right here. You can even visit the UK branch of the SPYSCAPE Museum and Experience in Covent Garden. So it won't surprise you to learn that this city, my city, is no slouch when it comes to spycraft. The fact is that it's had a lot of time to practice. London has been England's capital, on and off, since it was first founded by the Romans in the 1st century CE. And like any centre of power, intrigue and espionage have always been baked into the brickwork. And speaking of masonry, you'll find some of London's best at the Palace of Westminster, which has been here in some form or another for nearly 1,000 years. This iconic Gothic revival complex houses the United Kingdom's Parliament, which is, in the very broadest terms, made up of the House of Commons, whose members are elected, and the House of Lords, whose aren't. The building you'll see on your visit to London isn't the original, though. It was mostly rebuilt after a blaze destroyed it in 1834. But that wasn't Parliament's first brush with a fiery fate. Late on the night of the 4th of November 1605, a team of men, lanterns aloft, swarmed into the basement beneath the House of Lords. There they found an extravagantly mustachioed man in his mid-30s, in a long cloak and a wide-brimmed hat. He was not supposed to be there. So they searched him, and they found that he was carrying a pocket watch, a handful of slow-burning matches, and some tinder. Not too suspicious for the time in and of itself. But then they found 36 barrels of gunpowder, and that changed the picture somewhat. Because the next day, King James I was due to preside over the state opening of Parliament. And if the man they'd captured had been allowed to go about his business, the unfortunate monarch would have been splattered all over the realm, along with a good chunk of England's Protestant nobility. The foiling of the so-called gunpowder plot is still commemorated in England to this day. The would-be bomber, a man called Guy Fawkes, is burnt in effigy on bonfires all over the country on the 5th of November. It's one of our less marketable traditions. But Fawkes' arrest wasn't a happy accident. This was no routine security sweep. It was the result of a wide-ranging counter-terrorism operation. The man behind it was Sir Robert Cecil. To the casual observer, Sir Robert Cecil didn't look like much. Standing just over 5 feet tall with a pronounced hunchback, he was often ridiculed for his appearance. Nonetheless, he served under Queen Elizabeth I and her successor, King James, as Secretary of State. He'd followed his father into the role in the 1590s. It's all about who you know, after all. But Cecil wasn't some clueless Jacobean Nepo baby. He was actually an extremely canny political operator during a particularly fraught period in English politics. See, England's Catholic community was a constant source of concern to its Protestant rulers. In fact, a series of laws passed in the 16th century had made it all but illegal to practice Roman Catholicism at all. And by 1605, Robert Cecil had already played his part in foiling a couple of papist plots against the crown. But today, he's best remembered as the man who exposed the most famous one of all, the Gunpowder Plot. It's the 26th of October, 1605, 10 days before the planned attack on the House of Lords. A footman is making his way through London when he's passed an anonymous note. He takes the letter to his master, William Parker, the 4th Baron Monteagle. Monteagle opens it, only to discover a dire warning. "My lord, out of the love I bear to some of your friends, I have a care of your preservation. Therefore I would advise you, as you tender your life, to devise some excuse to shift your attendance at this Parliament." The letter goes on to warn of a terrible blow against Parliament too. So why are the plotters giving Monteagle the inside track? Well, he's a Catholic. They're not keen on the idea of killing one of their own. But they've underestimated the Baron's allegiance to the crown, or perhaps his fear of Sir Robert Cecil. So Monteagle takes the damning letter directly to the Secretary of State. Nothing to do with me, Gov. Cool head that he is, Cecil keeps the intel close to his chest. He quietly begins to surveil Catholics with a connection to Monteagle, observing their comings and goings, taking note of who and where they meet. His plan isn't just to stop the attack. He more or less knows that's a given at this point. It's to identify the entire network. As we know, on the evening of the 4th of November, Guy Fawkes is caught red-handed beneath the House of Lords. Now Cecil has just cause to bring the rest of the conspirators down. Fawkes is brought to the Tower of London, on the banks of the River Thames. He's interrogated. He says nothing. So, on the King's orders, the interrogation is enhanced. Under torture, Cecil was able to extract the names of the co-conspirators from Fawkes. Many of them were already on the run, but as they fled, men were dispatched across England to bring them in. Cecil adopted a scorched earth policy towards the plotters. In January of 1606, 8 men, including Guy Fawkes, were publicly executed. Another was Francis Tresham, brother-in-law to Baron Monteagle, and a possible source of the letter that kicked this whole investigation off. I'll spare you the details, but it really wasn't pretty. This was death as propaganda, a warning to other Catholics who might be considering rebellion. But Sir Robert Cecil didn't stop there. The government published accounts of the story that partially credited divine intervention with the king's survival, as opposed to good old-fashioned intelligence work. And of course, a national holiday was established to commemorate the plot's failure. And if you needed any more proof of Cecil's total mastery of the narrative, well, even this lapsed Catholic is partial to a toffee apple on Guy Fawkes night, 4 centuries later. Now, as with any old story, there are those who question the exact truth of what we've just heard. Some believe that Sir Robert Cecil already knew that something was brewing before the Monteagle letter landed in his lap. The fact that he reacted so calmly to the plot's discovery and the difficulties the plotters would have faced in securing that much gunpowder undetected lend a bit of weight to that theory. Others go further, suggesting that Cecil deliberately allowed the plot to go on until the very last moment so that he could expose as many conspirators as possible. And some on the fringe go even further than that, suggesting that the whole thing might have been encouraged or even fabricated by Cecil's agents. The motive? To gift the king a very public propaganda victory, and remove a few troublesome Catholic noblemen in the process. A false flag, in other words. That's pretty unlikely. Although the fact that Fawkes' confession was only made under torture, which any decent intelligence officer will tell you is unreliable at best, certainly muddies the waters. But honestly, we'll never know for sure. Skip ahead around 100 years and London was still a city divided by religion. In 1702, King William III died, and his sister-in-law Anne replaced him. Most of us associate Queen Anne, if we associate her with anything, with a style of furniture design. But when she first came to power, she quickly earned a reputation as a staunch defender of the Anglican faith. That's the official Church of England, which the monarch is still technically in charge of today. Anne took a hardline stance against other Protestants who didn't adhere to the Church of England's teachings, a stance she shared with the powerful Tory party in Parliament. Those various non-Anglican denominations, Presbyterians, Baptists, Quakers, etc., were known as nonconformists or dissenters. One such nonconformist was Daniel Defoe. He's best remembered for writing some of the first novels in the English language. But before he turned his pen to books, he was better known for his political pamphlets, which were a hit among the intellectual Londoners who gathered in the city's taverns and coffee houses. In 1703, a satirical publication which took aim at the Tory party's attitude to nonconformism landed him in Newgate Prison, which used to stand on the site of the Old Bailey in central London. Now, Defoe did not enjoy life in Newgate, not one bit, and when someone offered to negotiate his exit, he was all ears. Defoe's unlikely rescuer was a man by the name of Robert Harley, an influential Tory minister. Harley would spring Defoe from prison, but in return, he'd have to become his spy, essentially switching sides. And Defoe's work for Harley took him a long way from London. Today, Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, but that wasn't always the case. James I, who we met briefly in the Guy Fawkes story, was the first king of both Scotland and England. However, that didn't mean that the two countries were politically or religiously aligned. In Defoe's time, our neighbours to the north still represented a threat. Robert Harley wanted to neutralise that threat by bringing Scotland into an official union with England. Daniel Defoe would be his instrument. The writer was sent to gather intelligence on public opinion vis-à-vis the Union and to identify key players among the Scottish elite who might be persuaded to lend their heft to it. As a known nonconformist, he was able to mix with groups of political radicals and religious dissenters. A previous life as a merchant, which had ended somewhat messily in bankruptcy, probably gave him some insight in how to deal with Scottish commercial interests too. And of course, at the same time, he was still writing pamphlets. These were, if you didn't look too closely, independent, but Defoe was also being paid to parrot the Tory line. Basically, we're talking about an influence campaign. Pretty soon, Robert Harley's agent in Scotland turned out to be a sound investment. The Act of the Union was ratified in 1707, creating, for the first time, a new kingdom, Great Britain. And the rest is history. Generations of British schoolchildren have enjoyed or endured Defoe's novels. Robinson Crusoe, for instance. But the writer's time as a spy is often overlooked, despite its contribution to the country as we know it today. The right words in the right ear have always been powerful agents of change, and where better to exchange them than in one's club. And no, we're not talking about the kind of place that does deals on tequila slammers. Members' clubs have been part of London's elite society since the late 17th century. Historically, they've been places for the wealthy to let their hair down in like-minded company, which obviously makes them incredibly fertile ground for spies.
We tend to be fairly familiar with the sort of big events of history running through the last 50, 200, 300 years. But there's always this club dimension running alongside that, and people going off to their clubs and having a sort of secret, separate existence in their clubs.
When author Seth Tavo spoke to Morgan Childs for the True Spies debrief, he told us about the important role that these exclusive places have played in the building of the British establishment. While early clubs played host to the boorish amusements of the idle rich, illegal gambling, boozing and all the rest, by the 19th century they were developing into genuine seats of power.
In 1834, the British Parliament burned down. And it took them the best part of 40-odd years to build the current Houses of Parliament, that big edifice you see with Big Ben on it now. And during that time, Parliament was quite literally a building site. So they had to migrate the functions of government to the clubs. And they were literally running large parts of the country out of the club.
Being a member of a club came with the implicit understanding that you were on the level, as it were. Respectable.
They are the social network of their day. They are the people who want to meet others, even if they haven't been properly introduced in society. And for a very hidebound, traditional, formal British way of socialising, If someone's a member of a club or a guest in a club, by definition, they know someone who knows someone who knows someone else who moves in your circles.
But powerful people have powerful secrets, and an innate sense of security isn't always a good thing, especially when the brandy starts flowing. That was James Bond author Ian Fleming's take anyway. He was a long-standing member of White's, the oldest private members club in the world.
Fleming quit White's because he said, and I quote, "they gas too much." He thought it was a far too gossipy place. And for somebody who was working in naval intelligence, that wasn't necessarily a good thing. If we look at actually what a spy does, clubs are of enormous interest to spies because they're discreet, because they're a place where people can let their hair down. They're a place where people can be themselves, or they should be themselves. It's literally just somebody's living room with an old group of friends very often, and a few newcomers as well, and saying, have you met my friend who's in town, that kind of thing. And as a result, for a spy, that is gold dust.
So it should come as no surprise that during the Cold War, you'd have encountered a few infamous names swanning around London's clubland.
Another name that might ring a bell to True Spies listeners is the Reform Club, and Guy Burgess was a member there. He was, of course, one of the Cambridge Five.
The Reform is actually a very logical club for Guy Burgess. It was for liberals and reformers, political reformers, and as a result, it became the club of choice for people on the left. So, because there wasn't an existing historic Labour club in London, a lot of Labour parliamentarians set up, but a lot of communist sympathisers, like Guy Burgess, would also quietly join a Reform club and feel very much at home there. It's worth noting that, as well as Burgess, Maclean was also a member of the Reform as well. Philby was a member of the Athenaeum, a couple of doors up.
Those are the British KGB agents Donald Maclean and Kim Philby, just in case you needed a reminder there. And look, even today, some club policies acknowledge their potential for leakiness.
The Travellers was a club explicitly set up for diplomats. That's a club that's sandwiched between the Athenaeum and the Reform. And the Travellers has, to this day, a fair number of people in the intelligence services who join it. They also have a lot of connections with diplomats because they make ambassadors from some countries honorary members. They've made it very clear that the Russian ambassador is not welcome as long as the invasion of Ukraine continues.
Now, Russia's ambassador might not be welcome at the Travellers Club, but London as a whole is less discerning. As one of the biggest cities in the Western world and a financial powerhouse, it's practically a magnet for Kremlin-aligned oligarchs, keen to spend their billions on some of Europe's most expensive property. In 2022, after the outbreak of war in Ukraine, we sat down with journalist Oliver Bullough for part 3 of our True Spies miniseries, Russia's Laundromat. He's the author of a book called Butler to the World, in which he lays out the ways in which Putin's people are able to buy a foothold in Britain. The example he gave us was that of Dmitry Firtash, a Ukrainian who built up a massive fortune acting as an intermediary in the gas trade between Russia and Ukraine in the early noughties. As we've seen with recent strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, the flow of fuel is a powerful tool of intimidation. And Oliver told us that Firtash helped the Kremlin to wield it.
He transformed that to being a tool of political control and a way of trying to dominate Ukrainian politics, to sort of recreate Russian influence over Ukraine. So what he was doing was very much against, what you might term Western interests, and very much in the Kremlin's interests. It's remarkable that Britain was so willing to accept that money, considering considering the price that money had been earned, at the cost of.
When Firtash arrived in London in the mid-noughties, he wasted no time getting his feet under the table.
He essentially arrived and followed a pathway that is open to very wealthy foreigners who come to the UK, whereby they can essentially follow a series of steps that allow them to integrate into British society. So he established a foundation and he created a society, the British Ukrainian Society, to sort of increase mutual understanding and, friendship and all the kind of yada yada stuff, which, these kind of societies do. But really what it allowed him to do was to rub shoulders with members, particularly of the House of Lords and the House of Commons, to create a network of friends in high places. And also he started giving money to Cambridge University, didn't have a Ukrainian studies department, and he provided the money to allow it to create one. So that was in 2011. So within 4 years of arriving in the country, he'd built this network of friends in the House of Lords and the House of Commons. He'd also got integrated to one of the country's most prestigious universities to such an extent that he'd been given a medal by the Queen's husband.
But he didn't stop there. Firtash was digging himself into London's very foundations.
He bought himself a mansion in West London. One property publication estimated it he'd paid £60 million, and I've never seen anything to suggest that that's not the case. And then his integration continued. He opened trading on the London Stock Exchange.
And to paraphrase Scarface, first you get the money, then you get the power. Firtash was able to parlay his financial contributions to Britain into serious influence.
He created a festival called Days of Ukraine, including various events inside the House of Commons. He met the Speaker of the House of Commons, which is one of the most sort of significant political figures in the UK. And then when the crisis in Ukraine built up in early 2014, Dmitry Firtash was invited into the British Foreign Office, it's for the Foreign Ministry here in the UK, to give advice to how to deal with Putin. And his advice apparently was, that this was all the Americans' fault and that, Putin should be treated very gently. He'd gone from being, an unknown business ally of Gazprom, Putin's gas company, to advising a G7 member on how to deal with Putin. And that in 7 years, that's a pretty extraordinary advance.
Britain, and especially London, is internationally renowned for its complex relationship with the class system. And yes, going to the right school or joining the right club is probably the most straightforward way to access our political elites. But the story of Dmitry Firtash goes to show that, for a price, no door is truly closed.
The real culmination of his sort of UK integration strategy came just a couple of days later when he closed the deal to buy a tube station from the British government. As far as I know, he's the only private individual to own a tube station. He bought that from the Ministry of Defence, who wanted rid of it, for £53 million. In fact, he was allowed under a scheme designed to encourage social housing. He was actually only had to pay a third of it up front and got 2/3 of it in the form of a loan from the government. So, that's the extent to which he'd sort of become part of the scenery here, that he was even buying property from the British government.
From the Houses of Parliament to the Square Mile, the city's financial district, London has a long and shadowy history. From terror plots to propaganda campaigns, double agents to dirty money, there's no aspect of spycraft that hasn't been practiced on these ancient streets. And that shows no signs of changing. Recently, plans for a new Chinese super embassy, just a short walk from the Tower of London, that's where Guy Fawkes signed his shaky confession, remember, have put espionage back in the headlines. Rumours abound that Beijing is planning to install a spy centre beneath the proposed building. Rumours that seem increasingly plausible. In January of 2026, the Telegraph newspaper reported that they had acquired unredacted plans for the new embassy. They seem to reveal a secret underground chamber, which sits right alongside fibre optic cables that transmit financial data into the Square Mile, as well as normal comms traffic. The plans also suggest that the chamber will be fitted with hot air extraction systems, possibly used to cool down high-tech, power-hungry supercomputers. Thus far, China has refused to be drawn on what purpose the chamber really serves. Britain's government, for their part, stated that it was not realistic to be able wholly to eliminate each and every potential risk. And in a city like this one, they're probably dead right. I hope you've enjoyed this whistle-stop tour through London's murky past and present. We've revisited it time and time again on True Spies, so if you're hungry for more, there's plenty to choose from. Try The Drunken Department V for the tale of a hard-partying Russian spy in the swinging 60s, or On Her Majesty's Secret Service for more subterfuge in the court of Elizabeth I. Or for a dose of old-school Cold War skullduggery among London's ex-public schoolboys, there's Kim Philby, Super Spy. I'm Joe Foley. As always, if you want more episodes of True Spies a week early and ad-free, be sure to subscribe to SPYSCAPE Plus at plus.spyscape.com. You'll also get access to exclusive bonus content like The Razumov Files, a modern retelling of Joseph Conrad's Under Western Eyes, and true crime caper The Great James Bond Car Robbery.
Porn is everywhere. Millions stream it every day, yet nobody seems to know who really controls the business. I'm Alex Barker. I'm a journalist at the Financial Times. Years ago, my fellow reporter Patricia Nielsen and I started digging into the porn industry to find out how the money flows. And in our new audiobook, The Kink Machine, The Hidden Business of Adult Entertainment, you'll hear our investigation into the power and influence that drives the most taboo corners of the internet. Find The Kink Machine, The Hidden Business of Adult Entertainment at pushkin.fm/audiobooks or at Audible, Spotify, or wherever you get your audiobooks.